Welcome back to Little House in the South. Today we're going to talk about the dreaded B word, budgeting. I'm going to share with you our top strategies for budgeting for the new year to help you get off on the right foot financially for the new year. I think we really dread budgeting because we think it means it's the end of having fun. No shopping, no anything, no extras at all. And I don't feel like that's how it has to be at all. It really does not mean the end of having fun. It means being as wise and efficient as possible, but still living your life. Another key piece to budgeting is that it has to be a team effort. You and your partner have to be on the same page with budgeting, or you will set yourself up for frustration and failure. If you're saving for something and your partner's not aware of it and they go out and they spend that same money that you were hoping to save up to pay off debt or whatever it is that your goals are, and they're not aware of that, it's just not going to work. To get started, you're going to want to make a very, very detailed list of all of your monthly expenses. You may even want to go back 2 or 3 months in case there's something that you might be forgetting. A lot of times, like your house insurance or your car insurance will happen every quarter, and so those might not show up in your monthly expenses, so you'll have to go back a few months to make sure you're not missing anything, because you want to calculate that out monthly as well and break down some of those costs too. So for example, some of the things that you are going to want to take into account for would be your food, your gas, any utilities that you're paying for. You're also going to want to take into account for your leisure activities, hobbies, any splurge purchases that you've made. You really want to get a big picture view of your expenses so that you know exactly how much you're spending on shopping, on eating out, on these things that are extras, technically. They're not part of your everyday bills, but you want to know like what your lifestyle is taking out of your monthly expenses. So after you have a really, really thorough idea of what your expenses are, then you're going to want to look at your monthly income. This is usually fairly simple because you usually have 1 or 2 streams of income and that's about it. Now, obviously, this is going to be a little bit more complicated for somebody who has a varying budget per month. If you're a contract worker or something like that, this is a little bit more of a complicated process, but for those of you who do have that situation, it's even more important for you to go back further in your expenses and those types of things so that you can get an average of what your expenses are and an average of what your income is. Once you have a really good idea of what your expenses are and what your income is, you can then begin to really narrow down your focus on what your goals are. This is super important moving forward to making plans for the future and planning where your money is going to go. So some of your goals could look something like paying off debt. It could be that you have a lot of medical debt that you need to pay off. You could have student loans or that type of thing. If you're a parent, you may want to save up for college funds for your kids. You may just want to save up for retirement. You may be in that place in life. All of these things are very important to consider when you're thinking about where you want your money to go for the future. There's also other goals that you may have, like vacationing or purchases that you want to make. So now that you have a really good grasp on your goals, your income, and your expenses, you can begin to make a strategy, a battle plan, and you can begin to tell your money where to go instead of wondering, oh my gosh, I had, my paycheck at the beginning of the month, I paid all my bills and had all this fun, and now I have no money to do what I really wanted to do with it. You can begin to plan ahead for birthdays, Christmases, those types of things, or if you have a family vacation coming up that you know you're going to want some extra spending money for, you can begin to plan ahead, and then those things don't come up and catch you unawares, so you have to go back into debt just to do the things that you want to do for fun or leisure or what have you. So I want to talk a little bit about some of our money saving tips that we are implementing in the new year and have been implementing over the past several years. Some of which are things like homesteading. At the new farm where we're moving to, I plan to try and eliminate as much of our monthly expenses as possible by growing, raising, and making our own food and products. So that's something that you can go as far into as you want to, and you can just dabble in it a little bit. It can be as simple as going to the farmer's market and buying tomatoes in bulk and making your own tomato sauce instead of buying it from the store to save a little bit of money. And that can be as far as you go into homesteading or making your own food from scratch. And you can go as crazy intense into it as going off grid. We would love to be able to do that. It's not super practical right now for us, but a lot of places will offer you huge there's lots of like grants and things like that for doing your own solar energy, and then you don't have an entire one of your big bills every month, your electrical bill. You won't have to have that anymore. So those are just some ideas as far as homesteading goes. I have an entire video which I'll link on downsizing and how you can eliminate a huge chunk of your monthly expenses by downsizing. You can eliminate a huge bunch of your, as far as your mortgage is concerned, by downsizing. And there's some other strategies I talk about in that video for downsizing your lifestyle to save money. In that video, I also talk about how you can sell off some of your assets. If you have a vehicle that you're currently paying on, you can sell that vehicle off, not have that monthly payment, and save the money and get a really cheap car instead, just until you get to where you want to be financially. Getting out of debt is huge. Debt is one of those things that slowly just leaches the money out of your account over time, and you're paying interest, you're paying all these extra things just to have that debt. And if you can pay it off and then remain out of debt and just save for those things instead of putting it on a credit card and then paying it off after the fact, if you can save ahead of time to pay for those items, you'll just be in a much better place financially because you're not losing all of that to interest every month. You can cut a lot of costs by shopping around for your utilities, for your insurances, all of those things you can shop around. You should regularly be shopping around for your insurance because year to year that can drastically change depending on legislation. It can change based on your health status. A lot of those things can affect your insurances, car insurance and house insurance as well. You may be able to get a better deal just by shopping around. And then the other big thing that we have done to save money is to do without what we would consider luxuries. Things like expensive cell phones and expensive cell phone plans. We do prepaid plans. It's a much less reliable carrier, I would say. We still have cell service everywhere we've been, but there are more dead patches where we don't have good cell service, and we just wait until we get somewhere where we have better cell service to send that text or whatever. And we do without, our smartphones. If we use up our data at the beginning of the month, then we just deal without it. We don't have cable TV or satellite. We just use streaming services, and then we only are paying for our internet bill and the smaller fee for Netflix or Hulu or whatever we might decide we want that month. And it's far less expensive than a cable bill. Another tip I would give is that you want to set yourself up for success. And by doing that, I really feel like it's important to have fun money built into your budget. You don't want to completely cut yourself off from the fun things that you do every month. You may want to limit those things, but pick 1 or 2 weekends a month that you can do something that is your hobby or your passion or whatever that costs money. And when you start to see where your expenses are going, you can start to see how expensive those things are and how quickly they build up in your expense column. The last thing I'll talk about is that there are tons of budgeting tools out there. There are many different apps. You can use there's Dave Ramsey advocates for the envelope system, where you get cash out and you have a specific amount of cash in an envelope for each individual budget item. We don't follow that. We find that we're pretty successful just using our debit cards. We don't really go over our budget in each area that way. If we were really struggling to stay within our budget and what we've allocated for each item, we would probably switch to something like that. And we've talked about switching to that for groceries because that's our one really variable item each month. But for the most part, we just use an Excel spreadsheet that Josh has created that tracks all of our expenses and we just manually input all of our expenses. But there are apps that can track all of your spending and can link up with your bank account and input all of that for you. We just haven't really dabbled into any of those. We like doing it, I guess, the old-fashioned way. That's all I have for my tips for the new year on budgeting. I hope you are super successful this year and meet all of your financial goals and aspirations. What are some of your goals this year in the new year? Do they have to do with budgeting? And if so, what are some of your goals in the new year for budgeting? Are you saving up for something in particular? Are you hoping to get out of debt this year? I would love to cheer you on as you start that financial journey this year. If you haven't made any goals, has this video encouraged you to try? It's so freeing to finally be debt-free and be in a place where we can really begin to live out the lifestyle that we've always wanted for us and for our children. So please like and subscribe, and I hope you will stick around because our next video in this financial series is going to talk about our emergency fund and why it's so important and why you should have one too. So please subscribe so you don't miss that video, and I'll talk to you later.